And Andy, it's widely described as the end of the old Republican Party and the start of the new.
Absolutely. The picking of J.D. Vance is doubling down on the populism that has made Trump so popular. And I think if you're looking at his policies, there's a lot of things there that are going to be of interest to all of our investors.
And what do you think so kind of just starting with this, and then we can kind of get into whether this will be the actual winning ticket in November. What does this ticket represent to you? And in what areas is it most different from the current administration?
Well, I think on the trade side, it's different, but it's not. So it's different in the sense of they're going to escalate what they've been doing with respect to the tariffs with China. Notice that Biden did not remove any of the tariffs on China, and he's actually increased some of them. But I think, broadly speaking, when you talk about if you go globally with the proposed 10% with everyone, which is really not, it's serious, but it's more of a negotiating open bid. But some of those countries will receive 10%. Tariffs. So it's much more robust in its tariffs. So from that perspective, I think the other thing is, in an interesting way, I think that if Trump follows J.D. Vance's lead with respect to the populist bent, big tech, large companies, banks, they're not going to get a free pass in this administration. I mean, they're going to have some openings and some things, but there's not necessarily going to be a free pass like there might be under another administration.
Andy, I'm curious, though, how much do you think of this is a populist flavoring versus an actual substantive policy shift? We've already heard Trump as a presidential candidate this time around talking about things like a flat tax, sales tax. Those things would hit the people who purchase things and spend a bigger part of their budget on that a lot more, and that includes the working class. And then, you know, he's not certainly as pro-union as the Biden administration has been, though J.D. Vance did mention unions in a sort of big tent way last night. And the Republican Party hasn't exactly been pro-social safety net. So how much of this is really a policy shift versus a tonal shift?
No, John, I think that's a great question. And so, look, I think right now what we're trying to do is sort through all of this. I mean, right now what we're doing is we're cross-referencing Trump statements with Senator Vance's past beliefs, with Project 2025, with the RNC platform. There's a lot there. There's certain things that are common among all of them. We know those are happening. We talked about tariffs, tax cuts for corporations and individuals. But beyond that, when you get the specifics, I think there's a lot of movement here, and we're not certain yet the specificity of what's going to happen.
So can you be truly populist and have tax cuts for the rich and a flat tax for the working class? Does that work?
Well, in Washington, it's not about purity, right? It's about direction. So I mean, if you think about it, this is still not your father's Republican Party. All right. So they're definitely moving away, but it's not going to be in total. And I think what they're trying to do is obviously appeal to a greater swath of people and increase the tent. And so that's why I think they're doing this direction.
So, Andy, what do you make of what's going on the Democratic side?
Well, look, there's a lot of, I guess the right word is tumult in the
That's the right
Democratic
word.
side.
Yeah.
So, look, I've seen a lot of volatility in campaigns, but I think the last 3 weeks I haven't seen anything like this. So right now, where we are is over the weekend, right after the attempted assassination of President Trump, you saw that the campaign to move Biden aside, it went away publicly, but it was still an underground operation, which we saw reported last night. So that's number one. Number two, you're looking at some of the polling in the AP. I think 65% of Democrats now want Biden to move aside. So I think that's the direction. But I think as you've heard over the last few days from a number of people, the person who needs to make that decision is Joe Biden and him alone.